Fellas, the fantasy football season gets ready to kick off tomorrow, and I'm absolutely fired up to bring you guys some of the biggest stashes, the must stashes, as you guys can see here, for the fantasy football season starting in week 1. It's your boy's 26th birthday today, so leave me some love in the comments down below, but let's get things going right away, talking about some of the guys that you should be stashing if you have an IR spot. So I would not roster these guys otherwise, but if you have an open IR spot, definitely check out Ricky Pearsall, Keaton Mitchell, and Kendre Miller. Ricky Pearsall, of course, he was shot recently, but he is back in the weight room. He is expected to play this year, according to the 49ers brass. It's a crowded offense, but Ricky Pearsall was a first-round draft pick, and he would be a huge beneficiary or an immediate blow-your-fab type of option if any one of Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle went down for significant time. So Ricky Pearsall is the perfect guy to throw at the end of your IR spot. See what happens. Worst case scenario, you drop him once he's back. Keaton Mitchell, also a very good IR stash. All of the rostership percentages should be on the screen for you guys. ACL tear last year, December 17th, averaged 8.4 yards per carry on limited touches as a rookie, had 47 carries, 92.5 PFF rushing grade. He was kind of like pseudo Devon Achane, and he, coming off of this injury, has a pretty open backfield outside of Derrick Henry. And we know Derrick Henry's an older guy, could deal with some injuries down the stretch, and Keaton Mitchell's kind of like a great late season play for those of you guys looking for some upside. And then Kendre Miller, I mean, we know Dennis Allen hates this guy, but once he gets off of IR after the first 4 to 6 games of the season, he could have a role in this backfield. Alvin Kamara is older. Alvin Kamara could deal with some injuries given his advanced age and his advanced touches, so maybe Kendre Miller becomes a thing. But again, I wouldn't roster any of these 3 guys if you don't have an IR spot open in your league. Now let's go through. What we're going to do here is we're going to go through all of the major positions: running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends. I'm going to talk about these guys in order. So the first guy I talk about for the top 5 running back stashes is the guy that I would pick up, assuming multiple guys are available. I'll go through deep league stashes at running back, at wide receiver. And with the top 5 running back and wide receiver stashes, I'm going to be talking about guys that are sub 30% owned, and then the deep league stashes will be sub 10% owned for those of you guys that complain in the comments that none of these guys are available. So let's start with the number 1 waiver ad at running back. We have Khalil Herbert, 27% rostered right now. Very solid back last year, averaged 4.6 yards per carry, was a top 16 graded running back per PFF in 2023. Swift is fragile. Swift is kind of shaky in between the tackles, and Caleb Williams could really elevate this offense. So to me, this reminds me a lot of the Miles Sanders versus Chuba Hubbard situation last year, except it's a way better team, a way higher ceilinged offense than what the Carolina Panthers represented in 2023. So if you guys want a guy that could literally win the job outright without an injury, I do think that Khalil Herbert could absolutely do that. And of course, if Swift were to get injured, he is a great handcuff as well. So I love adding him if he's available in your waiver wire. He is one of my favorite running back ads going into the year. Next, we get into Jalen Wright, running back of the Miami Dolphins, 22% rostered right now. He's a dual handcuff, right? We know that Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert are probably going to be the lead backs in Miami to some degree, but both of those guys, Achane's undersized, Raheem Mostert's older and relatively injury prone. I do think there's a possibility that Jalen Wright has a role at some point during the season. So this is probably not the type of back that you want to add and hope that in week 1 you'll know exactly what his role is. There's a good chance he doesn't have one early on in the season, but he was a top 3 graded running back for me coming out of the NFL draft this year, just behind Trey Benson, just behind Jonathan Brooks. He's a great athlete, a good receiver. He's physical. He's elusive. He's got all the tools to be a great running back. He kind of just was a little bit raw and didn't really know what he was doing. So it actually would be really good for him for the first 5-6 games of the season to probably not be on the field very much, learn from the veteran running backs ahead of him, and maybe down the stretch, he ends up being a really good option. So if you're going to pick up Jalen Wright, remember that this is probably a late season play, a stash for most of the season type of play. But if you have an open bench spot, I do believe he's a good option. Ray Davis, 14% rostered. We should know right away if Ray Davis is a factor in the Bills' backfield. He's either just a handcuff to James Cook, or he's going to have a role in short yardage on the goal line. Whatever case, he is a good stash nonetheless because he's a good hard-nosed runner, was a really solid prospect as far as what he can do in between the tackles. Good athlete, good size. They've been looking for a guy like this for years. Like, they brought in Latavius Murray, Leonard Fournette, a number of different dudes, Damian Harris, to try and replace a goal line back role, and they probably don't want Josh Allen to be their goal line back. So if James Cook isn't able to take over that goal line role, I do think Ray Davis will be the primary beneficiary of that. Top 5 graded running back by PFF in the preseason as well. He was pro ready. He had a good production profile, even though he was an older prospect. So feel pretty good about Ray Davis. Definitely a good stash for the end of your bench for some upside. Jordan Mason, 24% rostered right now, clear handcuff to Christian McCaffrey. Fourth rounder, Isaac Guerrero was hurt, and he's also really raw for most of camp. Elijah Mitchell is out for the year. So if anything happens to Christian McCaffrey, I believe Jordan Mason has a chance to be a huge, huge league winner. 5.2 yards per carry last year, top 10 graded running back per PFF. So if you're looking for a total lotto ticket, hold them on your bench for as long as you need to. Or if you're a Christian McCaffrey manager and you want to roster your own handcuff, Jordan Mason is your guy. Number 5 running back pickup this week is Marshawn Lloyd, 20% rostered, top 6 running back in the 2024 class for me. A.J. Dillon is out all season long. Josh Jacobs, a little bit older, also has a lot of touches under his belt. And Matt LaFleur has said he wants to run a running back by committee. Now, it may end up being that week 1, week 2, Marshawn Lloyd is still coming back from the hamstring injury. He did avoid IR to start the season, which is definitely great, but he's still not practicing. So this could be a situation where week 3, week 4, he's the best waiver ad out there. But if you have an open bench spot and you wanted to stash Marshawn Lloyd now, then you wouldn't have to worry about blowing your fab on him week 3, week 4 if he has a decent role once he's healthy. So definitely a guy that is a good speculative ad. See what you have for the first couple weeks of the season and then drop him worst case scenario. Now let's get into some guys at running back where if you guys are in deeper leagues, a lot of those guys are probably rostered already if you're in 14-man leagues, 16-man leagues, leagues with 7 or 8 bench spots, stuff like that. So let's talk about some of the deeper league names. And again, anybody that I talk about first is the first guy that I would add, and anybody I talk about last is the last guy I would add. So Tyrone Tracy, running back of the New York Giants, 9% rostered right now. Exciting dual threat running back prospect. He had great athleticism. He was a converted wide receiver, very similar to Antonio Gibson coming out of Memphis. Devin Singletary is whatever ahead of him on the depth chart. Devin Singletary's fine, but I don't think he's like a superstar. And he appears to be the second running back in this backfield behind Devin Singletary. He had an ankle injury scare that had all of us concerned, but I do think in the lone preseason game Tyrone Tracy played, he looked very good. So he has a chance to be really solid this year. Kamani Vidal of the Los Angeles Chargers is my second deep league name that you guys can roster. He had a pretty poor run out to the start of the season. A lot of people thought he could have won this job outright over Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins. I have been obviously staunchly on the side of J.K. Dobbins, but J.K. Dobbins has dealt with injury. Gus Edwards has dealt with injury, and none of these guys are really proven in this backfield. So if you want to stash a guy, see what his role is early in the season, I think Kamani Vidal is a great guy to go after. Same goes for Will Shipley. I think best case scenario, you're looking at he's the Kenneth Gainwell of this offense and also the handcuff to Saquon Barkley. So you could pick him up if you guys are looking for some upside. Saquon's an older guy. He's dealt with injuries in the past. So again, if you're looking for a guy to just stash at the end of your bench, see what happens. Will Shipley was a solid prospect, had a good receiving profile coming out of Clemson, and carried a big workload in college. So if anything does happen to Saquon Barkley, I do think that Will Shipley would be the primary beneficiary of that, but there's a chance that he doesn't have much of a role if Saquon is healthy. So if you're looking for a pure stash, handcuff, lotto ticket type of guy, I think Will Shipley's a decent option in deeper leagues. Deontay Foreman, also of the Cleveland Browns. Now they cut him and then they brought him back. I still think there's a chance that him and Jerome Ford are like 50-50 splitting until Nick Chubb gets back. It's one of these guys that you could pick up and know exactly what you have week 1 and drop him if he's nothing or keep him if he's something. We've seen Deontay Foreman be a great waiver wire ad in the last couple of years with Carolina, with the Chicago Bears, with the Titans last year. He's had a couple very, very good weeks when he's gotten opportunity, and there's a chance he has opportunity early on in the season for the Cleveland Browns, so keep that in mind. Dylan Laube, the final name here, very, very deep name, pass catching specialist from New Hampshire in the draft. Goes to Las Vegas Raiders. Alexander Mattison, Zamir White ahead of him on the depth chart. Neither of those guys are great pass catchers, so it's possible in an offense that doesn't have a whole lot of quarterback talent that they could look Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell to check the ball down a lot. And if Dylan Laube is on the field in a lot of third and long situations because they don't really have a good run game, there's a chance that he has a good like James White, Tariq Cohen PPR appeal as a rookie. So keep him in mind on the waiver wire speed dial or pick him up if you guys are in really, really deep leagues. Now let's get into the wide receiver stashes here. So there's going to be a lot of guys here that I do think are good stashes for shallow leagues and deeper leagues alike. A lot of these guys I've talked about in the sleeper video, so I'll kind of save you the arguments on them. Wide receiver 1 here, pick up number 1 at wide receiver is Jalen Polk of the New England Patriots. If he is available in your league, 28% rostered, definitely pick him up. He's probably not available in sharper leagues, But Jalen Polk has a chance to be the number 1 receiver for the Patriots. I broke him down in the Sleepers video. If you want the entire argument on why him and Drake May are such a good match, he works over the middle of the field. Drake May throws over the middle of the field very well. Jalen Polk was the 37th overall pick in the NFL draft. Very, very good pickup for a lot of teams that need wide receiver help. Same goes for Dontavian Wicks. Again, he is currently the number 4 wide receiver on the depth chart for the Packers, so that is why he could be available in more shallow leagues. But Matt Hartman's reception perception, the advanced metrics, yards per route run, targets per route run, really like Dontavian Wicks. And he has a chance to really carve out a nice role for himself in an offense that doesn't have a clear alpha right now. So Dontavian Wicks, again, I talked about him in depth on the Sleeper video as well. Josh Downs, wide receiver of the Indianapolis Colts, is injured right now, coming off of a high ankle sprain. He was out, 4 weeks or so. I think he suffered that injury, and it looks like he's going to be on track to play starting in like week 2, week 3, maybe week 4. He was not put on the PUP list, so it is possible he's back before then. And I do think there's a chance, like they talked about Indianapolis Colts camp, that he was their best player. He was better than Michael Pittman. He was better than Adonai Mitchell. And I believe it because he was a really good prospect, had a solid rookie season, and him and Anthony Richardson seemed to have a pretty good connection according to a lot of the Colts beat reporters. So if you guys want a stash for wide receiver heavy leagues, especially like leagues that I play in that are 2 wide receiver, 3 flex, full PPR leagues, wide receivers are impossible to get on the waiver wire. And I think Josh Downs is one of the few guys that could end up cracking your lineup each and every week if he's a solid player, which I believe he is. Number 4 is Xavier Legette, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers. Not a good run out for him this offseason. Got injured. Missed a number of games in preseason, missed a number of time in training camp, and he was not the type of prospect that could afford that. He was a raw prospect, needed a lot of development coming into Carolina, so I expect him to start the season to be like the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 on the depth chart, but he was a first-round pick. They traded back into the first round to get him. He is a height, weight, speed, freakish athlete, and it sounds like Dave Canales and the Carolina Panthers know how they want to use him early on, so there's a good chance that Xavier Legette takes a week or 2 to get up to speed, and then finally is maybe the number 1 or the number 2 wide receiver as the season goes along. Again, Carolina is not a great offense, but I do think that Xavier Legette was a good enough prospect that he could elevate the play of Bryce Young in addition to all the, Deontay Johnson and Dave Canales, the additions they've made on that offense. I do think that Xavier Legette is a very, very good stash for late season. And then finally, Jalen McMillan is my final major stash of the wide receiver position. He is actually sub 10% rostered, but he is such a good ad right now because I think he'll be the number 3 receiver day 1 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I do think he has a chance to win out the number 2 job. And again, I talked about him in depth in the Sleepers video as well if you want to check that out. So some deeper wide receiver names as I talked about here, sub 10% ownership. If for those of you guys that complain that we never talk about deeper names, Troy Franklin, Malik Washington, Jermaine Burton / Andre Yoshivas, Jacob Cowing, and Malachi Corley. So with Troy Franklin, he was a very, very good prospect, 2nd round, 3rd round caliber prospect, but he fell to day 3. He has had a horrible run out this offseason. Sounds like he hasn't really looked good in training camp, but he's a very young player. It doesn't really shock me that Devon Valet, who's 26 years old, is looking better than Troy Franklin, who's barely 21. In training camp. It's possible once the season goes along, Bo Nix was his college quarterback. It's possible that he, lobbies for his guy to get on the field. A guy that if you're picking up Troy Franklin and you're just going to drop him week 2, there's no point in even rostering him anyways. You're probably picking this guy up with the intention that week 5, week 6 is when he starts to get on the field, when he starts to carve out a role. So if you're okay rostering a long-term play, Troy Franklin could be your guy. Malik Washington, also a prospect I absolutely loved in the NFL draft process. A very good offense. Behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they don't have a whole lot with Odell Beckham on the PUP list. So I think Malik Washington has a chance to get on the field, be a slot receiver, be a design touches guy. We saw what he was able to do in the final preseason game when he was given opportunities as a punt returner, given opportunities for a design carry against the Buccaneers. So I do think that there's a chance that Malik Washington carves out a role early on in the season. Between the Bengals wide receiver 3s, pick your poison. Jermaine Burton is more of your long-term hold because it appears Andre Yoshivas has the starting job in 3 wide receiver sets to begin the season, but it depends what you need. If you're looking for upside, I think Burton's your guy. If you're looking for immediate PPR flex appeal potentially, then Andre Yoshivas could be your guy. Number 4 on this list, we have Jacob Cowing, who is going to be a direct beneficiary of Ricky Pearsall being out. He was a 4th round pick by the 49ers as well, and I actually thought as prospects, Jacob Cowing Cowing and Ricky Pearsall were very comparable. So there's a chance that he starts as a slot receiver for this team very early on in the year, but there's also a chance that he doesn't see the field until week 10. So again, if you pick up Jacob Cowing and you have like deep leagues, like 8-9 bench spots or whatever, he's the type of stash that works in those type of leagues, but I probably wouldn't roster him in any other kind of league format and wait for him to kind of pop up on the waiver wire if Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel or somebody like that went down. That's probably when Jacob Cowing would be worked into the rotation. And then final deep wide receiver name, we have Malachi Corley. Actually has a chance really to get on the field early on in the year because outside of Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams on the outside, there is a little bit of a open slot receiver job here between Xavier Gibson and some of the other guys that they have there. I do think Malachi Corley could get on the field early as a design touches guy, get the ball in his hands on screen passes, on, end arounds and stuff like that. But if he makes plays, he has a chance to get more opportunities on the field. So Malachi Corley, again, similar to Cowing, if you pick up Corley, you probably shouldn't drop him after 1 week. He's probably more of a long-term stash. See what happens to him as the season goes along. So that'll close out the wide receivers and running backs. Again, I did list these guys in order, so if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I do have a couple tight ends and quarterbacks listed here just in case you guys maybe punted the tight end position, you're looking for some upside on your bench, or maybe you're in a really deep league and you want to upside stash a tight end in case you find the next Trey McBride. Noah Fant, Tucker Kraft, Greg Dulcich, Chig Okonkwo, and Ben Sinnott, all of varying kind of ownership levels. Noah Fant is going to be your more shallow league stash here. He has a chance to really carve out a role for him in the Seattle Seahawks offense. I don't think Tyler Lockett's the same player, so if you're worried that it's a crowded unit, I think this Ryan Grubb scheme is going to throw the ball a lot, and Noah Fant lost Colby Parkinson and Will Dissly out of his tight end core from last season. So there's a very good chance he's running more routes, playing more snaps this year. He is a premier tight end pickup for those of you guys that maybe punted tight end. Like if you took Pat Freiermuth or Dallas Goedert or somebody like that at the end of the position after all of your league mates drafted highly, valued tight ends, I think pairing Noah Fant on your bench with one of those guys is a good way to get some upside to go along with the safer player that you might have picked up, Dalton Schultz or Freiermuth or something like that. Deeper leagues, especially Tucker Kraft is a really good stash. I think he's better than Luke Musgrave. I think as the season goes along, he's going to win out that job. It's unfortunate that he tore his pec in OTAs and it took him a while to get back on the field, but it is a very, very wide open offense. I know it seems crowded, but the best players are going to rise to the top there in Green Bay, and I think Kraft has a chance to carve out that starting job. Greg Dulcich is kind of in the opposite situation where he was once a very, very high upside kind of tight end pick, but he got injured all of last season, dealt with a hamstring injury the whole year, but it's a wide open offense. Other than Cortland Sutton, there's no real significant target earners there. I like Troy Franklin. I like Marvin Mims. I like, whoever else, Josh Reynolds, but Greg Dulcich has a chance to carve out a nice role there, and I think he is a good upside stash. You should probably know right away what you have in Greg Dulcich week 1, week 2, week 3. If he's running 40% of the snaps, you can drop him, but if he is the clear starting tight end for this team, like I think he will be, he has a chance to be another great second tight end if you grab a safe one earlier on in your draft. Chig Okonkwo, also a similar situation. The Titans are going to throw the ball like crazy, and if he's not in a tight end by committee, and we'll know that week 1, week 2, week 3, he has a chance to be a really solid value at the tight end position as an athletic guy who we were once very excited about. Same goes with Ben Sinnott. Again, you're going to know right away what you have week 1, week 2, week 3. If he is totally stuck behind Zach Ertz on the depth chart, there's a very good chance that he's not fantasy relevant until Zach Ertz gets injured or until he wins out that job. So Ben Sinnott, also a speculative add to start off the season. And I think for him specifically, he doesn't even necessarily need to be the type of guy that if you have a weak tight end core, you go after, because I think his upside is really high, that even if you have a great tight end and you just have an open bench spot and you want a trade piece, if he hits, Ben Sinnott is the type of guy that could be a good option for you. And then finally, we go to the quarterback position. Drake May, Justin Fields, Bo Nix. Similar theme with all these guys. Low-owned, high-upside quarterbacks. The only quarterbacks in one quarterback leagues that come very, very low-owned then end up hitting. Think of C.J. Stroud last year, rookie quarterback, guy that we didn't know what we were expecting. That is the Drake May and Bo Nix argument. Both of those guys actually run more than C.J. Stroud did. So if Drake May comes out, gangbusters, looks like a franchise quarterback, he actually runs a little bit too. So he has a chance to really be a great fantasy option, waiver wire ad for those of you guys that are quarterback needy. And then same goes for Bo Nix. I mean, he's looked good so far in the preseason. Both of these guys have. And Bo Nix can run the ball a little bit as well. And then we know what Justin Fields brings to the table. Once he's the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I think will happen at some point this year, the only question is a matter of when, because Russell Wilson has won the starting job and probably has a leg up on him in the competition. Justin Fields as, wild and crazy as he is, can run the football and will be really good for fantasy for his own fantasy football value. So if Justin Fields becomes the starter of the Steelers and you just want to hold him until that time because you don't think Russ is very good and you think it's going to be like week 3 by the time Justin Fields is starting, I do think he's a decent upside stash, even in one quarterback leagues. If you guys punted quarterback and you grabbed like Tua Tagovailoa or Brock Purdy or something like that, and you had an extra bench spot and you wanted to stash Justin Fields on it just in case he becomes the starter, he is probably going to be a more valuable fantasy quarterback than those type of guys once he takes over the starting job, because he runs like crazy, and we know how much rushing fantasy production absolutely matters at the quarterback position. So again, appreciate you guys for joining me in this video. Leave a like down below if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. It is my 26th birthday today, so appreciate you guys for sticking around. I believe this is the 5th birthday that I've celebrated on this channel's history. Way back in 2020, I talked about my 22nd birthday, so appreciate you guys. If you guys have been around that long, absolutely let me know down below in the comments how long you guys have been subscribed to the channel. Of course, we hit 50,000 subscribers this week, so we really appreciate all the support. And before we get out of here, I do want to tell you guys that our weekly rankings manifesto is coming out. If you guys had this last year, it was available on Flock Fantasy. It is also available with an Underdog Fantasy promo code FSE sign up and first deposit. So if you guys want to check that out, definitely do so. But what you're going to get in the weekly rankings manifesto is every single week we update our weekly rankings. We update them probably daily, if not semi-daily, to give you guys the best starts and sits for your fantasy football lineups. But not only do we give you our weekly rankings, we also give you access to all the Vegas information, over-unders, implied point totals, where the sharps are betting, DVOA matchups, who's got a good advantage this week, wide receiver, cornerback matchups, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, adjusted fantasy points per game matchups. Everything that you would need to set your lineups is in that weekly rankings manifesto. And like I said, you can get access to it one of two ways. Either get it on flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE when you sign up, or you can get it as a free gift when you sign up on Underdog Fantasy using the promo code FSE and depositing $10. And right now, of course, they have the live Travis Kelce Pick'em special leading into the first game of the season. They have tons of promos. You guys can see them all on the screen. All week long, they have tons of promos coming. So make sure you check that out. And again, both will be linked down below in the description and in the pinned comments. So again, appreciate you guys for joining me on my birthday here. Peace out. We'll talk to you soon.